It's time now for Perspective, where we'll be taking a closer look at the second Elizabethan age and the death of the Queen. Our guest is the author and broadcaster, Maëlys Bessery. Maëlys, thank you so much for joining us. You are, of course, the producer of a podcast produced here in France. It's called La Grande Traversée. It examines Elizabeth's reign and it can be found on the France Culture website. You're also the publisher of a book as well. Perhaps you can tell us a little bit about that. Firstly, we've heard so much about the Queen over the past 2 weeks particularly, also during the Jubilee celebrations earlier this year. Tell us, what is your own view on how she should be remembered?
I was very interested in 2 points of view that I crossed during the interview. So first, there was one BBC commentator telling me, no matter how you try to define the monarchy, it always slips between your fingers. There's something very difficult to say about it, which you think you have a proper definition, and it's not. And there's also this older definition from David Mackler, who was an historian and worked on the finance of the monarchy. And he said to me, it's like the Rorschach test, and you can see whatever you want through the monarchy. You can project whatever you wish. And there's something like that. And in a French point of view, of course, that's very different. But we also have this artistic view of the Queen. She's been a subject of paintings, of drawings, of pictures, and she's an artistic pop art subject, and she's also a very traditional object, and the way she's been portrayed in fiction, in The Crown, in films like The Queen, and she's so much a subject of interest as a political point of view, historical point of view, but also in an artistic point of view, which is, I think, very interesting.
And we've seen an estimated hundreds of thousands of people filing past her coffin in London over the past few days, people travelling from all over the world, including here in France. Were you surprised just by the outpouring of grief that we've seen? Has any of this come as a surprise to you, or through your own research, would it have been something that you would have expected?
I did expect the same. Yeah, I'm not surprised at all. I mean, she's been the Queen who experienced the war. She's part of history, she's part of the memory, and no matter if people are Republican or monarchists, she does represent a huge symbol as an ambassadress of the United Kingdom and the Commonwealth. She was very much, and the Commonwealth was very important to her too, so she has this both sides, and I'm not surprised. They celebrate the Queen, but they celebrate her as a character too. She's been very devoted to the function, no matter what we think of the function, and so this is admitted by everybody. The thing is, the symbols she is, it's the monarchy is more and more symbols and images that they produce. The communication has been more and more important because she wasn't allowed to talk on her name. So the speech has been written by the government. So it's much more about what you show about yourself, your clothes, the symbol. Everybody talked about the Brexit hat and all that stories. So she was a symbol of soft power. And so the big deal is, at the time, there's a grief, and everybody is together and gathering around King Charles. What's going to happen later? Who knows?
The Queen, she's been described as both a traditionalist and a moderniser. How do you think, and it's an awful long reign, 70 years, but how did the firm, as they call it, evolve during her reign?
I don't think she's any modernizer. I think she's very much traditional, and she really is from that generation of exemplary family, very much like her grandfather George V, and she represents this very dutiful woman. But as the society evolves, and you can see in her own family, the divorced and and even the partner chosen. I mean, there's no more princesses chosen from a noble aristocratic background like it was for Princess Diana, for example. So she had to evolve, but it wasn't her choice for sure. She was always in a very traditional point of view. But that's the big challenge for King Charles. I mean, is he going to represent this kind of evolution, being himself divorced and having a family who's involved in many ways, and he spoke for minorities too. He has different point of view on faith, for example, and he's very interesting in several religions. So this is going to be maybe his own path to as a king, who maybe.
What do you expect for him? He was often controversial in the past. He's had no problem with voicing his various views on certain subjects. Do you think his reign is going to differ an awful lot in that regard to that of his mother's?
Oh, probably. I mean, the first film we have from him is him shaking hands, being touched. You know, she has never been touched in public like this. So it's a very different mystic, royal mystic, you know. He wants to break the glass and to be closer to people. Is this going to work or not? Who knows? I mean, it's maybe it's something they try to do. You can see the royal communication playing on that, you know, a close king to the subject. We'll see how it works.
And he's been very closely observed, of course, over the past week or so. We had that incident in Belfast, the leaking pen in Northern Ireland. How do you think those kind of instances are going to be managed? Do you expect more of that kind of awkwardness for him, or is it to be expected that you're going to have moments like that when you're mourning your mother and there's so much that's being expected of you, you're taking on all these new royal duties? How do you think he's going to manage all of that going forward?
Well, this started before her death. I mean, before Her Majesty's death, during the trip of Kate and William in Jamaica. You know, there had been a lot of issues about, you know, you have blood on your hands, your ancestors have blood on their hands. So, and it's quite kind of weird because we do understand how, you know, painful history it is, but at the same time, they have no power for 2 centuries, so they can't be directly considered as responsible of the decision and military decisions. So it's a kind of strange between they have to deal with. So we'll see how much Charles is able to have a speech of tolerance and how he's going to be accepted.
And you'll be watching the funeral coverage, I presume, a little bit later on, as will millions around the world, we're being told. Why do you think this still holds so much fascination with people? People will always be looking towards the British monarchy. Why is that?
Because it's a living history. It's a living memory. It's something very weird to people who are not monarchists, but I mean, that's a living history, characters in the same clothes and same traditions for centuries, and they are, you know, in this dynasty for so long, and so it's fascinating, and it's, of course, everybody criticizes it, and in a very French point of view, that's very weird. I mean, but at the same time, people are fascinated by those characters who they don't know personally, and who represent a part of history.
Okay, thank you so much for joining us with that insight, Maëlys. That is Maëlys Bessery. She's the producer of a podcast here in France. You can find it on the France Culture website, and it's called La Grande Traversée, available currently just in French. Thank you so much for your time, Maëlys. Let's take another look at our top story this hour.